Hope you're nice and relaxed and soothed by my intro music. Yeah, well, all kidding aside, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I'm super glad to be with you once more for another episode of the South Shore Audio Podcast. I have some very exciting and some very interesting things on the way for you guys. I am going to be doing more stuff on YouTube. So I've actually recently just finished recording a video, a screen capture video where I created an entire demo using nothing but samples. Imagine that. I didn't record a thing, just arranged a song with samples. And that is really cool. It's going to be quite a intense project to edit because there's like several hours of footage, over 3, probably pushing 4 to be honest. But yeah, so be sure to keep, well, I'll tell you where to look. I'm going to be probably announcing this stuff on my Instagram account, which I have linked to my Facebook. I'm not really much of a Facebook person anymore, to be honest. I don't use it personally. I don't really use it for business or for, I'm just not into Facebook anymore, and I like Instagram. But the two go together, so anytime I post on Instagram, you can always shoot it out to Facebook, and that's what I do. So follow South Shore Audio on Instagram. Go ahead and look it up and give me a follow. That's where I'll be, putting little posts out there, just kind of reminding you about the various things I've got going on. If I'm going to be releasing a new video or a new podcast or something like that. And my YouTube channel also goes by the same name, South Shore Audio, which it's brand new. There's really no content there except for just videos that I've made with prior podcasts. But those aren't really videos. That's just another means of distributing my podcast, really. That's how I look at it. So that's what's there for now. But yeah, there's going to be some new cool stuff being put up on the YouTubes. So please keep your eyes peeled for that. So otherwise, because I'm going to be focusing more on like actual showing you how I do music production on YouTube with video, because I just came to the conclusion that the best way to show you and talk to you about how I do that is to do videos, in particular screen capture videos of me working in Ableton, or if I'm actually recording with somebody, which is not all too often, because I do so much just in the box nowadays, not even using microphones. But when I do, YouTube is going to be the place for all these things. So that being said, that's going to sort of shift a little bit for how what the podcast is going to be about, the subject material. I'm gonna let this podcast be something that's a little bit more, I guess, philosophically based, or kind of just me giving my stream of consciousness reactions to, or not reactions, but just my thoughts that are going on at a given moment in time, because that's what is beautiful about podcasting. Is it's not only is it something entertaining to listen to, hopefully, but it's also a means of documentation in the here and now. I'm documenting how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking here and now as I record this, but it's going to exist forever. So I think that's really cool. So the podcast is going to be, I would love to do more interviews, which this episode is an interview-based podcast. A little bit more on that later after I get through this first rant. I would love to focus more on interviews, but they are just very difficult to coordinate because modern American life is just busy for everyone. It's busy for me. It's busy for my guests. So, if I'm counting on interviews to be releasing material to you guys, then nothing's ever going to get released because I'm not Joe Rogan, I don't, well, very few people are, of course. So that's not really a fair comparison. But, if you're in a position like him or something similar where you podcast all the time, and you've got a big platform from it, then you've got new guests rolling in every single day. Like there's just a line of people. And that's just not the case for me. If I want a guest on my podcast, I have to go out and find them. That takes time. So I'm just going to be kind of checking in with you guys, and I'm going to be making a new commitment. I'm going to be releasing a new podcast once a week from here on out, and I'm going to try to make Friday my new release day. So, and sometimes I may not have like a whole bunch to talk about, and other times I'll probably have a lot, and that's okay. But I just want to be more frequent so that you guys feel like you're hearing from me more often when we got more contact, and we can get more friendly with each other. So if you are enjoying the podcast so far, I have a few things I'd like to ask from you. The first thing I want to mention is I have an email list, and my email list is going to be awesome. If you guys join, you're going to be among the first group of people to be jumping aboard, and I am going to be using my email list to, again, keep in contact with you guys, but I'll be notifying you of new podcast releases. I'll be, just giving you the recap of what the podcast was about, when I release new YouTube videos, just different things like that. Things that are going to be interesting and helpful to you guys about music production. You're going to want to be sure not to miss your opportunity to join my email list, because it's going to be an awesome place. And on top of that, if all that wasn't reason enough to join, I have an offer for you. That's right. I've got something that you're going to get for free just for signing up for my email list. I have my own sample pack that I've created. They are a group of, let's see, I believe it's over 40, about 41 or 42. I don't remember the exact number, but it's over 40 samples that I've created all by myself, that I use. And in fact, this new demo that I was telling you about at the beginning, I used a couple of my own samples on that song, which you'll see when you watch the video, how I use them. And yeah, they come in every key, every major key of music, and there's a few under each key. So be sure to go ahead and go claim your free pack of samples by signing up for my email list. You'll be given a link to a Dropbox folder where you can sign them up and claim them. And then a couple more things before we move on to the meat of the show. I would really appreciate it if you guys, if you like the show, if you could leave me a nice review right here on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform that you're listening. It really does help the show. It helps us get higher rankings, and I guess me. It helps me out by getting my show higher up there and just more credibility, and also helps other people who are searching for a good music show to listen to, or production show, to know that, hey, this is a good one. In the same way that when you go to buy a product on Amazon, you're looking at the reviews, right? Because you want to know from third-party people how good or not good something is. And then the last thing is, if you guys would, if you guys could share the show with a friend, that would be fantastic. All you got to do is just tell someone about it, whether that's in person, through a text, or out there on your own social media, and just say, hey, check it out, guys. There's this cool podcast that, talks about this different thing, or whatever the show is about. But there's somebody out there that needs to hear this, that I know can benefit from something that we're going to talk about on one of these shows, because these things and these subjects that we grapple with on the show about our music and trying to get better with things are things that are, at least I believe, are universal to all of us music producers. These are just things that we all go through, and we need community. We need encouragement. So I would love to play a part in that. So tell your friends about it, and let's bring them all along for the ride. We've got a big tent in this, on this show, and in all the places where I'm going to be doing stuff. Yeah, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about today's show. This show is going to be a great one. I absolutely love this interview. It's with one of my one of my good friends. His name is Blake Rice. He is a musician. He's a guitar player predominantly, but I think even calling him a guitar player is selling him short because he's such a brilliant musical mind. Guitar isn't the only instrument he plays. He can play some other things. I just learned recently that he could play keys, and he just bought this like vintage Rhodes. Um, Really awesome. I'm going to be seeing him soon, and we're going to be playing with that. Probably going to record some video. But, anyways, I met Blake on Easter Sunday of 2018. I have some friends at a local church here in town. Um, I'm not like a member of the church, but I do play there from time to time, just through my relationship with people who are on that worship team. They're just good friends of mine, and because I have that good working relationship, there's just an open door for me to come in and play and hang out. And Blake plays on the same team, and Blake was playing that same Sunday, and we just got to talking, and I just felt like this guy was like instantly a friend. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it other than I just felt like I had met a kindred spirit. Um, and indeed, to this day, I consider Blake to be a kindred spirit. And even in the short time that I've known him, which now is just a little over a year and I don't know, a couple months, um, in that short of a time, I already consider him to be a good friend. Um, he's just a great all around guy, just a great human being, a down to earth guy, um, just a humble and friendly personality, um, an interesting guy. You can sit and talk to him about all kinds of things. He's not a one dimensional limit. Well, I mean, no one's one dimensional, but he he's just a very well rounded guy. I mean, we can talk about all kinds of different things, and um, yeah, I just feel like I've found a good friend in him, and unfortunately for me, but fortunately for him, he shared some news with me recently that he got a job and he's going to be working at Sweetwater as a sales engineer. Now, that's not too far from where I live. It's only a couple hours, but that does mean that the amount of times that I see him, that's going to go down a lot, unfortunately for me. But great for him. I'm so excited that he got that job, and that'll be super, super cool for him. So congrats to you on that one, Blake, if you're listening, brother. Um, yeah, so that's just kind of the setup for the interview. Our interview covered a wide range of topics, man. Like starting from the beginning, we sort of talk about his origin story as a musician and as a guitar player. We get into some technical stuff, talking about modes and some music theory, which is not an area that I have much expertise in. I guess it's not my strong suit, but Blake is pretty good at that, so we covered that. And then, yeah, just, man, so much. I don't even know where to start. And it's a long one. This sucker is like an hour and a half, so be patient, but it's definitely worth a listen. It will be rewarding in the end, I think, for you, because we just had such a fruitful conversation. I felt like we were not that this was not just we're passing the time just for the sake of it. Like, this was a very purposeful conversation. We covered topics that are relevant, that are important. And this is even an interview that I'm going to listen back to in the future, just because there's some good nuggets in there that Blake shared with us, and especially the stuff about the modes. That stuff is supremely helpful for me. And also, before I forget, as a part of this podcast episode, we decided to create an original song. So we created an original demo, and I wrote all the parts, and Blake wrote the lead guitar and guitar part. And yeah, it's featured at the beginning of the interview here, but it's also played in its entirety at the end. So be sure to stick around for the whole thing. We just call it the 80s demo because it sounds kind of 80s. So yeah, guys, without further ado, I want to introduce to you my good friend, Blake Rice. Let's roll the interview.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the South Shore Audio Podcast. I'm Danny, I'm the host. That's the show that's all about making music and producing music for the modern age. That's kind of what I like to think this is all about. What this is all about, rather. And you'll notice in my voice I'm very congested and under the weather, so sorry about that. But the show must go on, because you only get so many opportunities to do stuff like this. So with me today is my good friend and partner in crime, Nick Schrader. Nick,
what's up?
And co-host of my last podcast. And then I've invited my good friend Blake. Blake, how's it going, my friend?
Hey man, I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Well, other than being a little sick, I'm doing pretty good.
That's good.
We're on the cusp of Thanksgiving, so
yeah.
Crazy to think another
Turkey.
year has almost gone by completely in its entirety.
I know. I feel like this year especially is really just flown out the window to me. I know I've done so much, but it feels like I woke up yesterday. It was January 1st. I woke up today, and it's November 20th.
Yeah.
It's really just flown.
Yeah,
I
no
love
kidding. Yeah. I've heard people say that the days go by slowly, but the years fly by. You know.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. So
I feel like once we hit August, things started flying. I don't know.
Mhm.
Like June, July, moderately long, but started picking up the pace once we moved through the year, towards the end of the year.
totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of like, it's New Year's, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now it's the spring, awesome, and summer came, and well, here in Indiana, of course, things transition into the colder weather pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Although we had some Indian summer this year, I can't complain. Had some early October days that were hot.
Oh yeah,
It's 85s.
I gotta be honest. I don't miss those.
Yeah.
I'm a cold body. I'll take my snow and my 30-degree weather.
Yeah.
You can have your 90-degree weather. That's just fine.
I'm not a fan of like the super hot heat, especially with the humidity that we get here
No,
in the summertime. But I'd rather have a 70-degree day than a 30-degree day.
I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I'll take 95 degrees with 85% humidity over 20 any
Ew.
day.
Yeah, I think I might too, even
No.
though it's, I don't know.
No.
Anyways, but we digress. We're not here to talk about weather.
We do digress.
Um,
This is not your local weather channel.
no, not at all. We're here to talk about, like I said, making music for the modern age and and how we go about doing that. So I've been writing some demos, and by demo I just mean like little pieces of music that I compose and put together that I can't wait to show you guys. I'm going to be doing episodes in the future where I just break down the demos piece by piece. Well, I'll play the whole thing and then I'll explain how I put it together. So we'll be dissecting that, and so that's going to be really cool. I'm excited about that. But today, Blake, you're the main thing that you do musically is you play the guitar. Yeah.
So they tell me.
Yeah.
I've been told.
Yeah.
I play.
You can do some pretty good guitar.
I've been told I'm a very good guitarer guy, if you can call me that.
Right. So we just want to hear, because even I think I've only gotten pieces of the backstory as far as your musical progression, your musical journey. So I guess it's appropriate to take it from the beginning. So when did you start playing the guitar? What was your first guitar, and what was your early inspirations? Like all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So my guitar playing journey started when I was really, really young. I think I was about 4 years old. And
that is really young.
I saw, this would have been what, 2001, 2002. I saw like a TV spot with it was a documentary on Stevie Ray Vaughan. Amazing blues guitarist. He was just prolific throughout the late 70s going through the 80s, even the early 90s, and unfortunately he passed away in a very untimely and tragic fashion. And
one of the greatest of all time for blues guitar.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, like
revolutionized,
unquestionably. He was like the torchbearer of blues through the 80s when everything was all about, pop and metal and heavy production values. And he's like,
Poison.
He's like, hey, I have a guitar, a bass player, and a drummer, and we're going to make a sweet record in my garage that's going to blow the socks off of everything you've ever heard. And so I saw that when I was really, really young, very, very impressionable, and I decided immediately, I want to do that. I want to play the guitar. I want to do it like he does.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere close to near as good as he is, and I probably never will be, but that's okay. I mean,
You're not trying to be. There's
I'm
only
not trying to be,
one
no.
Stevie Ray Vaughan. There's
Yeah.
only going to be one
and I don't
Blake
want
Rice.
to. I don't want to try and be him. I'll get into that a little later. But yeah, I saw that, and immediately I started begging my mom for a guitar, and it was just on and on and on. It went on for about a year. Finally,
And how old were you at this point when you were begging for the guitar?
I was like 5. I was around 5 years old. Like, but I think I was between 4 and 5. I started begging.
That's crazy.
Yeah. No, it is. It really is.
Wow.
And then finally, at 5 years old, on my 5th birthday, my mom got me. It was a Yamaha FG Junior. It was a really small-bodied, short-scale Dreadnought acoustic. Absolute piece of garbage. Terrible guitar. Like, looking back, it was like unplayable. And I got it, and I kind of started tinkering around, and I had a lot of fun with it for a little while, and then like any typical kid, I kind of lost interest after a while. It just sort of dropped off the radar. I mean, I was a 5-6-year-old kid.
What
I
kind
had
of
other
attention
interests.
span can you have at that age?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but that kind of like personal conviction to be like, I'm going to practice every day and get really good at this. It's like nobody has that ability at 5 or 6 years old. So I kind of had learned a few things at a really young age, and then I put it down for quite a few years. And the guitar just kind of sat in the corner of my room, gathering dust and rusting the strings and bowing the neck, all kinds of horrible things that you should never let happen to your guitar. And then finally, when I was around 10 or 11, I started to pick it back up again. And so for my 11th birthday, my mom signed me up for guitar lessons for a while with a local teacher. And the guitar lessons really kind of inspired this snowball effect, I think, because I started lessons, and he really kind of helped me build the fundamentals, like essentially like the bounce pass, the dribble, and the jump shot of playing guitar.
Exactly.
And from there, it was like, if my guitar teacher were to describe it in basketball terms, he would say, like, it's going from like bounce passing to draining threes overnight. I mean, I just picked it up so fast, and I became a sponge. I just kept absorbing as much as possible.
Right.
I only had about a year and a half of formal education. Then after that, I started teaching myself how to play, and progressively got into more difficult and progressive music. I mean, I learned a lot of Stevie Ray Vaughan songs, and then I got into like Eric Clapton. Clapton kind of morphed into like Led Zeppelin, Van Halen. That went even further forward into the 80s, like shred monsters like Vi, John Petrucci of Dream Theater. And then I got into like
Satriani.
Satriani, I'm a big Satch fan. Satch is awesome.
Can't leave him out.
No, absolutely not. He's literally Vi's teacher.
Yeah, he's the godfather of like that really shreddy guitar
he's the
stuff.
godfather
Yeah.
of like that solo shred guitar style that became kind of in vogue throughout the 80s. Really, I think it was just unemployed guitarists trying to make money, but it was pretty cool, so I'm okay with that.
Turned out to be a demand for it after all, though.
Yeah, I know. Even still, there's a big demand for that kind of stuff. I mean, you have...
Yeah.
But anyway, this might be interesting. I have really bad ADD, so I could go all over
It's
the
okay.
place.
You're free. There's total freedom to roam around here in the store
Sweet,
as much as
sweet.
you see fit.
But yeah, it was like I kept progressively like, I was just working more at pushing and challenging myself with different music, and it was like the more I learned, the more I had to push myself to find more new and challenging music. And, eventually I was getting into fusion guys like Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Even some more modern guys like Guthrie Govan, who plays with Steven Wilson. He also plays with...
One of my favorites.
Yeah, Guthrie's outstanding. He played with... he played guitar for Asia for a while. He played with... he plays with a trio called the Aristocrats that are fantastic.
Oh, yes.
I actually used one of their pieces for an audition once. That was a lot of fun to learn. Very, very big challenge to learn, but
Bad Asteroid, was it?
yeah, it was the song
that's right.
Bad Asteroid. Great song. Just an awesome, like, funky jazz, metal, rock,
Everything.
blues, jam. It was literally everything all rolled into one. That's why I liked it, because my short attention span can appreciate a song that changes every 25 seconds.
Yeah.
But it was just pushing myself in those directions, and then
And how are you discovering all of these different variegated artists and styles when you were so young? Like,
it was
the internet, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's
Getting
one thing.
lost
I
down
think,
the rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's one thing I think I was kind of lucky to grow up in the age of the internet, like
Sure.
the very digital age,
Right.
Because like
I mean, most 14-year-olds nowadays are listening to Ariana Grande and
Ugh.
crap like that. I mean, there was.
Don't get me started. There's
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. There's a place for that, but
Yeah.
I just
And I
don't-
mean, 10
yeah.
years ago, it wasn't her; it was somebody else. But that profile,
It was like
you know what
Britney
I mean?
Spears,
Exactly,
or
exactly.
Mariah Carey,
Exactly. And so most
every
people who-
generation has that like teeny pop star.
Exactly,
singer
exactly.
that has the-
I'm talking about that archetype, that
Yeah.
profile, like the,
Except now I feel like it's a monthly thing. It's like 1 month it's Taylor Swift, then it's Katy Perry, then it's Miley Cyrus and Ariana Grande, and then it's
the nature of
it changes.
the top 40 pop industry is like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
what's the
yeah.
flavor of the week? Okay, but
Well, yeah, the
my
top
point
of it,
is like
yeah.
most people who are your age, who would have been your contemporaries at that time, they probably weren't listening to music that had the same level of depth, and basically you were already steering yourself into an esoteric niche so quickly.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
such
I
a young
was-
age, you were already
Yeah.
carving out in this really nichey, if that's even a word, nichey area.
Yeah, no, I mean,
How did
was,
you get there?
I was like 15, 16 when I started really getting into the weird stuff musically. I mean, it's like, like most people were listening to like, the pop stars. They were listening to like rap music. Maybe you'd have a few like metalheads or guys who liked like, oh yeah, I like Led Zeppelin. I'm like, that's cool and all, but have you ever heard of The Weather Report?
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
Tom Waits.
or Tom Waits. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Actually, one of my very early inspirations, just as far as writing, was like Tom Waits and even like
Nice.
the Eagles, Jackson Brown. Love those guys.
Right. But again,
as a player, like developing my tastes, it was like, it was just the rabbit hole that was YouTube.
right.
Just like it starts with searching like really fast guitar playing. That's every young guitar player. They're like, I just want to get fast.
Yep.
Fast.
Yeah.
As you get older and you can go fast, then you realize, oh, I don't need to go fast all the time.
Yeah.
It's like just because I have I'm not going to say a Ferrari. I'm definitely not like going to compare myself to a Ferrari. I'll say like maybe
You're at least a V8 engine.
sure,
on the guitar,
maybe
at least.
maybe I have like this, what's the one I'm looking for? Like that
You've got the gearing.
like a Pontiac Trans Am. Yeah,
Sure.
like an old school Trans Am, with the
Yeah.
big gold
Muscle car.
Phoenix on
Yeah.
the hood. Yeah. It's like, sure, I've got all this power, but I'm not going to drive 100 miles an hour just to go to the grocery store.
Right.
So it's
good to
kind
know.
of,
Context.
and I'll get into that in a little bit too, just like, playing tastefully.
Right.
But it's like, as you're pushing yourself to go faster,
yeah, that's good. That's
if you search-
philosophy talk.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're pushing yourself to play faster and faster and more complicated music, you hop on YouTube, you Google really fast guitar player, you find this dude named Michelangelo Badio.
Oh, I just met
yeah.
that guy a few weeks ago.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
No way.
Chicago, man.
Oh,
It
yeah. Was he?
uh,
Did he do a gig up there?
He did, yeah.
You have to admit, I mean, sure, he does the super shred fast thing.
Yeah.
He's a very, very well trained musician. Like,
Yeah.
he has a
Sure
degree
is.
in classical music.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A very, very smart dude. Apparently, like the nicest. I mean, was he super nice to you?
Very down to
I've heard he's the nicest dude on earth.
He is like
Yeah.
Yeah.
in his videos. I always thought
Him and like Andy Timmons.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
Oh,
another
Andy Timmons is
amazing
so
player, by
great.
the way. Andy Timmons.
Oh,
my
I have
word.
I have such a sad story about Andy Timmons and Nick. You were there for. And
I
yeah.
think I know this story.
Yeah.
We've talked about this.
Yeah, the short story,
Oh,
the
gosh.
condensed version is this.
Oh.
On my last podcast, we got Andy Timmons on for an interview. And the very first time we talked to him, he actually, like, I had like a program called Skype Call Recorder or something like that. It wasn't working right. And then he's like, oh, well, I got to go anyway, fellas. Sorry, something came up. Let's do this later. Okay, no problem. So we postpone it. And then we talked to him. We were actually on vacation as a group, me, Nick, and Nick's brother Luke, just us three guys in Arizona. And then we're talking to Andy Timmons, And then I messed up somehow, and I didn't record his line. So the whole interview, it's like it never even happened. It did happen, though.
It was a good conversation.
Nick and Luke will bear me witness that it did happen.
We have witnesses.
And
We
it
have
was a great
witnesses, folks.
conversation, but it wasn't recorded.
That is
Only my audio and
That's
Nick's
sad.
and Luke's obviously got recorded, but
Wait a minute. Is my audio recording?
yes.
I'm not
it
going to
is.
say this is going to be a great interview. It's probably going to be pretty incoherent.
I can see the
So-
wavelengths being printed as we speak.
Sweet.
So we're good. We're good.
I love recording.
But I know, me too. But anyways, yeah, I felt like I needed to rehash that because you mentioned Annie Timmons. I'll never forget that the interview that never was. But yeah, actually, my one of my dad's cousins, she used to live in Chicago. Now she moved to Massachusetts somewhere. But she was telling me once about I was at some family gathering or something. And she was like, "Oh yeah, have you heard of Mike Badio? He used to like live down the street from me or something like that. Super nice guy. He
Mike
was kinda,
Badio. Yeah, Michelangelo Badio.
right? That's what she called
Oh,
him.
crap.
The keys
Mike.
to the Ferrari.
Yeah, he's just Mike.
Lamborghini.
Yeah,
Right.
that classic. It was like, what was that? Wasn't that like a Starlix video or Hot Licks video
Yeah,
or something
like
like that from the
Speed
80s?
Kills.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you the keys to the Ferrari. Just like flying, and he had like this crazy aircraft grade
Yeah.
aluminum
Yeah.
guitar with
Yeah.
like 29 frets on it. Just unnecessary, but
Yeah.
so cool and so 80s. You know, that was just. You know,
Yeah.
80s was the time of excess, but
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like
And produced guys like Yngwie Malmsteen too.
Oh,
yeah, oh.
He's still living in the 80s, the glory days of the
not,
80s.
not gonna lie,
Leather pants.
Yngwie he's a good guitar player. I won't deny that.
Yeah.
My gosh, he's kind of a jerk. Though.
Yeah,
he's-
just listening to him talk, I'm like, man.
He kind of comes off like a douchebag.
Honestly, if I was in a
Sorry,
if
but-
I ran into him in a bar, I would probably not even acknowledge him. I don't want to start that conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm Yngwie Malmsteen. I'm the greatest neoclassical guitar player in the world. I
Yeah.
play Fender Stratocaster, Marshall amplifier.
scallop with the scallop
With the
frets.
scallop
Yeah.
frets and the
Grab that
Because you could just really grab that string.
You can grab the note by the balls.
There's
and
a really
just-
funny.
I'm starting to turn into Donald Trump a little bit.
Yeah, I
in my
know.
voice.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's kind of
Yeah.
shifting a little bit.
it's like,
It's
we're
gotta
gonna,
be
we're gonna play
Swedish.
the guitar.
gonna be
We're gonna play
Yeah.
the guitar better than any
Yeah.
other guitar player in the world.
greatest.
It's gonna be great. We're gonna make guitar great again.
you've
Yeah.
heard.
Um,
Okay, believe me. But anyway,
yeah.
there's a really funny like studio tour that Yngwie Malmsteen has like on YouTube.
Oh, the whole like this room is tuned. Thing.
Yeah, he's like,
yeah.
he says he
This-
points
this
and he's
room is
like,
tuned.
these aren't just pretty little baffles up there.
Yeah.
This room is tuned.
Yeah,
and then at the
I know.
end, for no reason, he's just like, see this suit of armor here, this
Yeah.
knight suit of
He's
armor.
showing
like,
off his Viking armor.
This,
Yeah,
this suit of armor
exactly.
cost me like $20,000.
yeah,
or
it's
something
like
that.
it's part of my family coat of arms or something.
Why? It's like
It's part
I
of the tuned room.
It's so like you said.
it imparts a certain characteristic in the low end that you just can't
Right.
replicate with anything
Yeah.
else.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's
like
just-
you said, like he comes from
Yeah.
an era of like the time of excess, like you said. So
yeah,
it's like,
he never left
it's
that.
exactly. It's so over
Well, I
the
mean,
top.
Here's the thing.
It's
I mean, a lot of-
comical. It's comical.
Yeah, but then here's the thing. A lot of other guys never really left that, but I feel like a lot of it has to do with personality. I mean, I had a friend. He attended a camp with Steve Vai. It was the Vai Academy, and he attended
nice.
this out at Berkeley. And Steve Vai, again, is one of those totally excess dude. He has the crazy swirl painted Ibanez guitars, and he just shreds and does crazy whammy bar stuff. But he just has this personality that he's a more likable guy. I feel like than Yngwie.
Yeah.
Yngwie is
A little
kind
more
of
down
like
to earth, probably.
Yeah,
Than,
yeah. Yngwie is just like, oh, this Yngwie Malmsteen signature Stratocaster's got my signature on that. It's the best guitar you can ever buy. That Yngwie Malmsteen Marshall head that's $4,000. That's the best amp you can buy. This Yngwie Malmsteen overdrive
Strictly
pedal
Marshall.
is the best overdrive you can buy.
Yeah.
He's like, he thinks anything he touches is the best thing ever. And Steve's like, hey man, I just ditched my signature amps to use an Axe Effects live. So take that however you will.
You're right.
And you know what?
He's
I
real. He's
actually,
realistic.
it's funny. I agree with him. I actually ditched my amp and pedals, and I went to an Axe Effects.
We are
We're
going to talk about that
too.
later. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the approach when we start talking. Yeah,
Oh.
later I do want to ask you about
Yeah.
your philosophy on guitar playing and
Yeah,
how to
yeah.
approach, depending on what
Any-
situation you're in, writing parts, how much to play, how little to play,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Anywho, the musical journey. We were
right.
we were talking about that, then we got to
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like
So you were in the teen years kind of thing where you were
years,
discovering
like 15,
all this
16,
stuff on
I was
YouTube.
starting to get into the more complicated stuff. Starting to push myself to learn things. I'd learned like a couple of John Petrucci solos and stuff like that, and
Some pretty complex stuff.
yeah, for a 15, 16-year-old kid,
yeah.
it's like, you pull stuff like that out and people are like, what the heck are you on? And so, that kind of was almost encouragement to me, like, yes, let's learn more cool stuff that I can, like, have these sort of party tricks in my bag, which, at the end of the day, they were kind of just that, party tricks. And it wasn't until I found actually a couple of guitar players, they're really like YouTuber guitarists. The first one was a guy named Tom Quayle from England, has a degree in jazz composition from Oxford, super smart guy, outstanding guitar player, but he had like the 80s shredder speed, but he also had this tastefulness,
finesse,
this touch to his playing. Yeah, he was just a very finesse-oriented kind of player.
Yeah.
To where he inspired me in the way that I was like, oh wow, speed is great and you can use it in a lot of places, but sometimes just sweet chordal work is all you need to get what you're trying to say across. Mm-hmm. And he was a master at balancing that. And it's funny, you'd scroll through his YouTube channel and he'd have like him playing over jazz standards, and then the next video would be covering like a Dream Theater song and just shredding through these Petrucci licks, and it's just this crazy
YouTube
stuff. And that's kind of what pushed me to be like, I need to broaden my horizons and my repertoire and begin to become not just like a fast guitar player, but like a versatile guitar player. And so one of the most life-changing things I ever did was pick up something called the Real Book, which to any young guitar player, for starters, teach yourself to read music or have someone teach you to read music. Secondly, once you learn how to read music, pick up a real book. It will totally change the way you look at and think about guitar playing, and it will just change it'll change the way you think about playing, because it's literally like a 400-page book of just jazz standards, single page lead sheets of jazz standards, just plain old sheet music. They'll have chords written above the measures, and then they'll have a melody. Just learn it all, play through it, like find a backing track, use a loop machine, record something in a DAW, play it back, just play over it. And it's going to push you to, kind of become more creative, because you're dealing with these complicated harmonies, and that's going to tune your ears. And that's where a lot of my guitar education started, was with ear training, actually. At the beginning, I was a very ear-oriented player. Like, I was one of the people, I could hear something, and then I'm like, oh, that's this. And then somehow, by some weird mental process, translate that into physical motions that would be cohesive on a guitar neck. And it was, once I started taking my musical education more seriously, I got to the point of like, oh, well, now I can put this down on paper, which means now I can read it off of paper. And I was able to start getting into even more complicated stuff, because if you want to really push yourself, put down a complicated guitar piece on sheet music and then try and learn it without listening to it. That's gonna change the way you really think about guitar. And that was kind of what opened the door for me to start taking music more seriously and almost treat it, attempt to make a profession out of it and make a career of it. And my musical journey throughout high school, ultimately, it led to me, it ultimately led to me making my way to music college. I went to the Berklee College of Music for one semester. I like to think I'm in
The
pretty
Berklee.
good... The Berklee College of Music.
Not Berkeley, California, people.
Yes. So many people get that wrong. I'm glad Danny clarified that. I think I'm in pretty good company dropping out after one semester. I mean, John Mayer dropped out after like a year. I think Donald Fagen from Steely Dan dropped out. All the guys from Imagine Dragons dropped out. Dream Theater dropped out. Yeah, so I mean, it's the school.
Why do you think those guys dropped out? Just as an aside, do you think it was financial reasons, or do you think it was because they just couldn't?
I wouldn't doubt if it
want
was
to
financial,
anymore?
because that place is freaking expensive.
Yeah,
But
and that was even then. that was a while ago that those guys are dropping out.
Maybe
Oh,
they felt
yeah,
like
How
they got
expensive is it
everything they
now? I
needed.
mean, it's
Oh, it's
astronomical.
when I was there, it was. No, I was lucky enough to get a couple scholarships that made my stay there a lot easier, but it was still. I didn't have a full tuition scholarship, so it was still quite expensive for me.
oh yeah,
But
no doubt.
I think full price it's like $65,000 a year after like your housing and your tuition costs and fees and everything.
Who can afford that? Yeah.
So millionaires maybe.
Yeah,
But
millionaires
what kind
are
of
people.
what
who
kind
are,
of millionaires going to college?
Yeah,
You haven't. If you're a multimillionaire, hey, I'm fine.
unless you want to go because
Unless you
want to
learn, but
Yeah.
that's like, yeah, that's just going to learn, not
Right.
just going to get a degree.
right.
Um,
Which most people aren't going to college to learn anymore.
no, yeah, it's
Whole separate conversation, but
Yeah.
college is
that's
weird
going to be
thing
another
nowadays,
episode.
yeah.
That's
another
gonna be
episode entirely. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. But
talking about why college is not as good as it once was.
yeah, a waste of time and money, generally
Yeah.
speaking.
But yeah, and it was interesting, honestly. Berkeley was a weird place.
Yeah.
It really kind of threw me for a loop as a musician. For one, even in one semester, I was able to glean and learn so much more than I could have imagined. I had a really amazing private lesson instructor, 2 instructors actually. One was a fellow by the name of Randy Roos, fantastic guitar player, also a great electronics technician. If any of you have played with a guitar that has a what's known as a sustainer pickup in it, I know Fernandez makes a sustainer, and then there's a more popular one called the Sustainiac.
Is it like the Moog?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Like
Is
the,
it like a
like
Moog
an
guitar?
EBow?
No, not quite. So it's going to be most similar to an EBow, but it's actually like an inbuilt component. It replaces an existing neck pickup. But Randy Roos, my first private lesson instructor, was the guy who actually invented that in the early 70s, and he installed one in his own guitar.
Wow.
And it was so cool because he showed up to a lesson, and he had like this crazy old hacked up Charvel. It was like, I think it was a Charvel with like a Jackson neck on it, and it had like a DiMarzio Super Distortion in the bridge. Then it had like a old Firebird pickup in the middle. And then the neck pickup was his original sustainer, like the first prototype. And it was just insane. He would just flick a switch and have this endless sustain. It would literally go on forever. And so he was really cool. And then I had another instructor by the name of Marty Walsh. I don't know how well known his name is outside of, tightly knit musician circles.
Sure. I mean, once
he
you're
was-
at Berkeley, you're in the top
You're in
1%.
it. Yeah, you're in
the
it.
musical world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Marty Walsh was he was like a second call studio musician in LA throughout like that golden era from the 70s and 80s. So he was out there
Not
rubbing,
like the Wrecking Crew era, was it? Not quite.
Little,
Just after.
little bit later than the Wrecking Crew. The Wrecking Crew was the Wrecking Crew was almost like Motown era,
Sure.
kind of, or like the
60s.
funk disco era, yeah, like 60s, 70s. This would have been like mid to late 70s through the 80s. So he was rubbing shoulders with the greats like Steve Lukather and Michael Landau and Lee Ritenour. 3 awesome guitar players right there, but then also just these insane guys like David Page. Who am I looking for? Joe Sample, fantastic piano player. Just everybody and their brother who was a big studio musician back in the day. Like he played on Michael Jackson records. And it was like this guy, he had credits on over 800 records between like 1977 and 1991. And to learn from somebody like that, firstly, it was cool because he had some insane stories because he played with some just crazy people back in the day. Secondly, he was actually really close friends with and was the bridge ultimately to me meeting one of my favorite guitar players, who is Steve Lukather. Best guitar player of all time for me personally. I mean, everybody's got their own, but he's like my number
And that's
one.
the guy from Toto.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
his number one fame is going to be with Toto. The band that does Africa. They have a lot of other great songs. I encourage you to look into the rest of their catalog.
It wasn't until much later that I even knew about the song Africa. The way
Yeah,
that
yeah.
my first exposure to them was because I loved the video game Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And in that video game, whenever you get into a car, there's all these radio stations.
Right.
And one of the radio stations was KDST, which played like classic rock songs, and one of them was "Hold the Line." Love isn't always on time. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
If you can hear the slightly out of tune and very quiet, unplugged electric guitar, I was just kind of playing the riff to hold the line.
Yeah. Blake has been holding an electric guitar this entire time.
I know. I feel like I'm a real trooper. It's kind of heavy, but it's okay. It's okay. It's also not even my guitar. It's Nick's guitar.
Right, exactly.
It's very, very nice.
He was just
I don't
showing
mind
it to
hanging
him.
on to it. It was like I was holding the guitar. Next thing I know, we start recording. So I was like, okay, I guess this stays here, which is fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent most of my life to this point with a guitar on my lap or on my shoulder, so it doesn't bother me any. Yeah, place, best place for it. If it's anywhere else, that means you're not playing it. So
exactly,
unless you're like Jimi Hendrix and you play it with your teeth.
Right.
Or Stevie Ray Vaughan, you play it behind your back or behind your head.
Right.
All things aside,
or with your toes.
Or with your toes. There's actually, speaking of Andy Timmons, you brought up earlier, there's this guy, what's his name? He's a guitar player from Brazil. He was born with no arms, but he learned how to play with his toes. There's a really cool video of him playing an Andy Timmons song.
And he's playing with him,
with Andy Timmons.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was what was it? "Cry for You."
Yeah,
it's like that real slow, like the
right. Yeah, that's a great song.
Very inspiring video.
Yeah, great song.
Awesome
song. Yeah,
that's a good
but
one.
this dude just like nailed it, note for note, with no hands. And it was like, if there's ever a guy who made me want to quit playing guitar, it was him, because I'm like, that guy had so many more challenges to overcome to learn how to play like that than I could ever imagine having.
Right.
Like, I was born with 2 functional hands. That guy didn't even have arms, let alone functional hands. He learned to play with his toes. I was like, man, if there was ever, like, I thought it was tough learning those solos. I can only imagine how tough it is for him to learn those solos.
With your toes.
It's like,
that's insane.
Gosh,
I mean, it'd be hard enough just to, like, hold a pick with your toes and just strum, not even press down on strings.
Yeah, or even like barring with your toes. Imagine trying to bar without throwing your guitar out of tune, or like just getting foot sweat all over your neck. Ugh.
Oh man,
it'd be weird. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be that weird, if that's how you grew up playing guitar and you didn't have to touch it with your hands because you didn't have hands. But
anyway, it's an extraordinary.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary feat. Jonathan Bastos, I think was his name. Bastos, like Bastos. Yeah, fantastic, really cool moment. I think it was in a NAMM show a couple years ago that he did that. But
that's insane.
Yeah,
wow,
just crazy. But yeah, back to Berkeley. It was one of those places. I mean, I kind of grew up in a smaller town. I grew up in a suburb of Indianapolis, or spent most of my life in a suburb just north of Indianapolis called Westfield, where, I was, as far as music goes, I was kind of the big fish in the small pond. I was I was like, I was the only one who's like, oh, I'm going to take this thing seriously and like take guitar playing seriously. And so once I got to Berkeley and I realized there were 1,000 guitar players there, all of which were, either at the same level as me or better than me, and then beyond that, all of which had like somehow way nicer gear than me, like 19-year-olds with like $4,000 custom shop Strats or made to measure Strandberg Bodens from Sweden.
Sure, I mean it's a really unusual kind of place because it's like the talent pool there is just so concentrated.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean it's like an oil. Think about like how a little essential oil bottle, like lavender oil or something.
I mean that'll last you for a long time,
right?
Yeah,
and that's what Berkeley is for musicians, right? It's
right,
like,
absolutely.
There, you're as a really good guitar player, you're just a dime a dozen.
Yeah, you're just another good guitar player.
Exactly,
like, everybody's a good guitar player.
So how do you stand out in that world?
It's really tough, and I think a lot of it is honestly, and this is a lot of what's great about going there, more than anything, rather than just the musical education, it's the networking. I mean, I was just talking about my old professor, Marty Walsh, who's like, he's rubbed elbows with all these great session guys. Well,
Right.
I had to do an interview of a professional musician for a class project, and I talked to him, and I was like, can you get me in touch with Steve Lukather? The next week, I think, I was sitting down to have a cup of coffee and talk with Steve Lukather about his life in the music industry and what it means to him to be a professional musician. And just making those connections to me. Like, I would regularly have lunch with James Taylor's brother, who was a professor on staff there, Livingston Taylor. Super, super goofy guy, actually. He only owns a motorcycle, which is not great when you're in Boston because they can randomly get dumped on with like 3 feet of snow.
And he still rides in that weather?
No, he walks.
Oh. He must live really close to where he works.
He does. He lives right downtown by the university. But yeah, it's like super goofy dude.
On the motorcycle.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I didn't even catch that. Yeah. Putting chains on the bike tires.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you'll be fine. No, you're
Snow
you're not
chains,
going
baby.
to lay it down or anything.
Can't do more than like
But,
30 miles an hour. But
Yeah, it's just making all these really cool connections with people. And I mean, it's been interesting. I was not the only one who left Berkeley early. I mean, in fact, a lot of my great friends who were attending there left early.
I mean, how many people finish? You
Not
think?
many. Well, I knew a lot of people who were there. They were going to blow their entire college savings just to go for a year. And I'm like, wow. I mean,
That's ballsy.
you know, the financial side of my mind is like, that's not a great idea. But at the same time, like the more philosophical side of my mind is like, they really have a goal and they really,
Yeah.
like, they want to be able to say they went there and they made those connections and now they're
And
going to
sure,
make a career.
well, think about what you can get out of a year at Berkeley
Oh, yeah.
if you really apply yourself and put an effort into networking and
Oh, yeah.
who you learn
Absolutely.
from. And so, I mean,
Absolutely.
you can't put a number on that.
No, you can't. I mean,
Yeah.
the returns from that are honestly, you know, you can't. They're priceless.
Priceless.
You can't put a value on that. Having those kinds of connections. I
Right.
mean,
So that's what it takes to, for lack of a better way of putting it, get ahead at Berkeley is just
Yeah.
everyone's
don't
good
be
at playing an instrument.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like being, I guess, a good networker, or like just being a good person, I guess, like being a decent person who's easy to get along with and
Yeah.
gets along with people, works well with people.
Right. Right. And I was fortunate. I was great friends with all of my roommates, really. Two of them in particular who went on. One of them actually is in a fairly successful death metal band called Hate Storm Annihilation. If you like death metal, look them up. They're
That's a very death metal name.
yeah. Well, it was his like 15-year-old brain that came up with it, which he's stuck with it. He's like 24 now, 24, 25 maybe.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, man, it's just cool. But yeah, his brain just kind of stuck with that, and then yeah, he went on to form another band, actually like a prog rock band, very Steven Wilson-ish,
Yeah.
called what were they called? Oh, the Mystical Hot Chocolate Endeavors. But it's just like, it's so funny when I see them like dropping these albums, or I'll get invited usually to like a band's Facebook page, and I was like, oh, this band name doesn't sound familiar. Then I'm like, oh, that's 3 of my former classmates. And it's like, oh, they have 10,000 likes on Instagram. That's pretty cool. And it was just, meeting, it was kind of cool to rub shoulders with people who may well be the music you're buying in the future and have
Right.
bought already. I've bought a handful of my good friends' records from there because they've gone into pretty successful bands or they've had awesome careers already.
Right.
But that was one thing, Berkeley in a way was kind of discouraging because you realize you're not, you kind of get this overwhelming feeling of not being
Very good.
very good. Yeah. I mean, it was like, we would have jam sessions all the time in my dorm. We had this big practice room in our basement with a drum kit and a piano in it. So like we would have, we would only set up one amp. So we'd only have one guitar player at a time. And we'd have a bass player, drummer, piano player. Anybody else that wanted to throw. Oh, hi, kitty. Hey, bud. Sorry, there's a cat scratching my
Savage
back
beast.
a little bit.
Siamese.
Yeah. I don't think it's a Siamese cat, Danny. It's something. It's a cat.
50%.
It's a good cat. That's all that matters. It's a good cat.
Good animal.
All cats aside, So,
Please don't make my podcast about cats.
Those friends of yours, they
I
were some
don't-
good
I don't
guys.
like 'em that much.
You mean you don't want to have a podcat?
Podcats.
What? No love for the dad jokes, huh? Tough crowd tonight, but I'm
Yeah.
tisk, I guess. But oh yeah, but we would have these crazy jam sessions. They would last till like 3-4 in the morning. I mean, everybody would have a
Nice.
great time. I mean, we would even have vocalists who would come and do these cool improv parts where they just like, some jazz vocalists would do some scatting or they would do some
Right.
runs or something. But it was like we'd only have one amp, and we'd call it trade the cable. So you'd plug straight into the amp, just rip a solo for like 12, 16 bars or something. And you unplug your guitar and pass the cable off to the next guy. And it was just rotating guitar players or
That is
rotating,
awesome.
rotating everything.
Wow.
And
Do you feel in that moment when it's your turn to play, is it like, do you feel like a very spotlight effect where all eyes all of a sudden turn and are looking at you play?
Yeah,
and you feel
absolutely.
like a social pressure from
absolutely,
It
100%.
Yeah.
gives you power. though,
110%. Yeah, it was. And,
that? I
it
guess
was
it
always
depends
cool.
on your personality, whether
Yeah.
that energizes you or whether
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
you feel nervous and
Sure,
break
sure.
down.
Well, and it's kind
On
of
the
weird.
ladder.
It's kind of weird too because I'm definitely, I would say, more of an introverted person, so I didn't always like that very much, and it put a lot of pressure on me that was
Yeah.
ultimately ended up being very negative for me. But and it was cool. It was super terrifying as well, almost mortifying, because you'd play something and be like, all right, I think that went pretty well, and then the next guy after you would just blow away everything you just did, just like
Sure.
in such a crazy way that you can't even understand half what he did.
But what was the mentality though? Like, did people have this kind of competition mindset?
Well, I mean, you're trading guitar solos. It
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
is a competition. I mean,
Yeah.
Lord knows the plight of every guitar player. As a young guitar player, it's essentially a giant pissing contest. Who can play the fastest? Who can play
Right.
the most complicated stuff? Oh,
Or
who has the
what
guitar-
measuring contest?
or
Yeah.
now, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I feel like even if it doesn't start off being like that, it turns into that.
Yeah,
you know?
it does. Or like, who
Subconsciously.
has the nicest guitar, or the current one, which I think is stupidly hilarious among young guitar players, whose guitar has the most strings.
Nah.
It's like, oh, dude, I just bought this Ibanez RG9. It's tuned to drop Q flat. It's like, wow, man, that's cool, but
Impressive.
I can't hear it through your guitar amp that cuts off at 80 hertz above that.
The
Right,
lowest
yeah,
string is
exactly.
as big as my little finger.
It's like
Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
low that like only my dog can hear it.
It's
Yeah.
so low
Yeah.
that that's probably roughly where the brown note lives.
Yeah.
It's like it's one of those things. It's like I
Bunch of
never
elephants.
have totally understood that. Now I will be full disclosure, I actually did just buy myself my first like extended range guitar. I guess that's the technical term for it. But I only bought a 7-string.
7 is still a lot to me.
6
Yeah.
is a lot. Are you kidding
Right,
me?
yeah.
I still feel like I can't figure out 6 half the time.
Me too.
7, I don't know why I got it. I mean, I've played it a handful of times. It's kind of fun, but it's just like, and it's something I do really want to get into more because I feel like with having a little bit of knowledge in music theory, I can really start to learn things in a different way and approach things differently from learning on that platform.
Sure.
But,
It'll cause your brain to think about things from a different point of view, I guess.
yeah, well, yeah,
Force yourself to.
absolutely. When there's two kind of schools of approaching the guitar, I feel like, from a very physical standpoint. Those are you can either think of guitars rooting from the lowest string, or you can kind of make your reference point the lowest string, or you can make it the highest string.
Interesting.
I'm personally a lower string reference kind of person, so to add an extra string, which on a 7-string guitar, typically the added string is a lower one. It's
Right.
in standard tuning, it would be a low B.
Like a bass, actually.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
a 5.
like
It's
the
like a
5-string
5-string
bass.
bass essentially, but it's yeah. But as a guitar player, when you're not thinking when you're thinking in terms of low strings, it kind of really throws you for a loop because you're not thinking. Well, your thinking is like, oh, this chord is going to be a B. Let's say you're playing on the 7th fret and you start on the lowest string. You're like, oh, this is going
Yeah.
to be. Well, actually, it's an F sharp now. Also, that chord shape is wrong because now your intervals are in different places. So essentially it's like you suck at guitar again. Congratulations. That's kind of how it's been so far. And I've only had it a few weeks, so I'm definitely still very much in the learning phase. I'd like to never leave the learning phase, to be honest with you. I love learning more on guitar, but it's been a fun challenge to begin approaching a different theoretical standpoint of the guitar.
Yeah,
to me,
that's a good segue to jump into the off-air conversation we were having before we pushed record. We were talking about modes. Yeah. So one of the things I want to have this podcast be about is if we're going to talk about making music for the modern age, then that means we're going to get into nitty-gritty stuff. We're going to have nerd talk, essentially. Yes. We're not just going to stay on the surface of things. We're actually going to so let's explain the modes here and see if you can demystify a little bit, because I've always gotten a little confused or tripped up. I've read a lot about it, and like I've sort of understood how well, I don't know. I guess my understanding of it was kind of on a surface level, and it's like I sort of memorized it more than I pieced it together and understood it. So let's just talk about it. Like, what are the modes, and how do they relate to each other and play off each other?
Modes are interesting. They're very, very interesting.
And how do you apply them too? That'll be another question to go over.
Yes,
because that's important.
So
that's everything, really.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna keep things pretty simple. I'm just gonna stick to the modes of the major scale. Mm-hmm. I do know a lot of additional ones, mainly because you can base your modes off of the harmonic minor or melodic minor scales, which is where you get some of the really cool sounding jazz scales. You get like your altered dominant and your Lydian flat 7 or your Locrian natural 2 scales, which none of that makes sense to most of you, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but that's,
and you would lose me on that too. So
yeah, I mean, I don't fully understand the stuff either. I know some of the basis of it. I'm still working on applying it for myself. But the major scale modes, there are 7 major scale modes, one for each of the 7 degrees of your major scale. Now, what's interesting, I'm going to use the example of C major, because the first way I really learned to apply the modes was on piano.
Sure.
And C major is the easiest scale.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Do you have an acoustic guitar handy, by any chance?
Yeah, I got a Martin.
I'm going to ask Nick to go grab the acoustic.
Just a Martin, Nick? Come on.
A Martin. I'm asking Nick to go grab the acoustic because I kind of want, as Blake is talking about this, I kind of want
I'll trade you.
Want him to play it. And so the mic will pick it up and you'll kind of hear what he's doing. Yeah.
It'll pick up that the dulcet tones of this wonderful Martin I'm about to play.
Certainly.
And my horribly dirty playing.
Sure. It could probably use some new strings, right? But
every guitar can use new strings at some point.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Probably just not in tune.
Ooh, that's pretty.
It'll get the job done.
Full disclosure, I've never played this guitar before either.
Nope. It's the first time you've ever seen it. Let's see how terribly off it is.
And there's a surprise pick in the strings.
Oh.
Cool.
Yeah, that'll throw things off. All right, so he's going to tune up really quick. And as he's talking about the modes, he'll be able to demonstrate them. Because I like to be able to see it in action as you're explaining it. Because if it's all in the world of theory, then it's hard for it to really stick with me sometimes. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and that's one thing, is taking musical concepts from theory to application.
Yeah.
Is the most difficult part of understanding music theory.
Right.
You can understand music theory on paper all day, and it's not going to matter whatsoever if you can't use it. So, like I said,
that's what makes a great guitar player, is how they've taken what they know and applied it into music.
Yeah, or fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
That works too, sometimes.
Sure.
Not all the time. But like I said, we're going to stick to the key of C major.
C major, all right.
This is going to be kind of home base. So the way that the modes really work is essentially in a circle. Some people reference their modes off the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths. I really don't like doing this. I think in a more linear fashion, so I actually think of them linearly. So I'll try and kind of hold this in a way where the mic will pick it up. Let's see. Oh yeah, we're picking it up.
Oh,
good. Yeah. So starting in C major, here's a C major chord for you.
Right.
C major scale. If you think of it, it's all the white keys on the piano. That's your C major scale.
Right.
So you have your C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C.
Right?
So the
free
modes.
guitar lesson here, man. I'm gonna follow you here.
Yeah.
And Nick's gonna follow along. He's not holding his mic like a bad podcaster.
Right.
So.
Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Just kidding.
It's like that Game of Thrones scene, the atonement of Queen Cersei. She's got the nun walking behind her. Do you watch Game of Thrones?
I'm not a Game of Thrones person. Are you, Nick?
Man. Are you a Game of Thrones
Have you
person?
seen it?
Not really. I watched a few of them.
Yeah.
Man,
Sorry. We're out
I'm
of the loop
alone.
on that one. So
that's okay. Never mind.
Went
I'll
over my
forget
head.
the reference then. It's too high class, I guess. But anyway, so C major scale, that's probably the first thing that most people learn when they take piano lessons.
Right.
So, and the reason I use this is because if you think of it and visualize it on a piano, it's easiest. And it just so happens I also applied that to guitar. So like I said, the modes exist in a circle. So take those 7 notes. The C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. C being just the first note over again. But say, rooting from a C chord, it comes out as a C major scale.
Right.
What gets interesting is when you start rooting that off of different chords, and then you start playing from different starting
Rooting being
points.
like
like you're
anchoring it in
yeah,
in a
like your
different-
anchor point.
Right.
When you start moving that anchor point, those same notes take on an entirely different character.
Right.
So we'll take that C major.
Because everything else that you're playing, the context that it's
Yeah.
framed in is what the root is, right? That
yeah,
anchor point.
absolutely. The root defines how what you're playing comes across, essentially,
I see.
or how it comes across.
Right.
Yeah, essentially what it evokes. Which you're thinking in C.
Right. C major, happy.
Yeah, major scale, happy.
Happy.
Now let's root that over a D minor chord. And we'll take those same 7 notes. Now you get what's the second mode. So the first mode, the major scale, is also called Ionian. That's an old Greek term for it.
All the names are Greek, really, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they all are pretty much Greek. So the first one is Ionian. The second mode is then Dorian, which, if you play a C major scale over a D minor chord, that's what you get. It's the Dorian scale.
Yep. So it's really just C major scale.
Yes, but at the same time, it's a C major scale. It's the exact same notes. Likewise, if you move up again, you play an E minor chord.
So it's that relationship between that mode and the chord you're playing over that really.
Yeah, so essentially modes are just really, and it's so stupidly simple once you start to understand it. Every single mode is one scale. It's just the chords that you play it over define what it is.
Yeah. Changes
So-
the voice of it.
Yeah, and so I could go in through all 7 modes here, or all 7 major scale modes, and get into how each one is different. But where you start to kind of break down those boxes, now I'm thinking... So now what I'm essentially doing is demonstrating... I'm taking one scale, playing it across different root chords or root notes, and what that's doing is essentially changing the character of the way that those notes interact with the root chord. So what I do is, instead of just taking that theology and applying it to every single thing that I want to play, so instead of having to think of, I want to play, let's say I want to play A Dorian. Well, that means I have to play G Ionian. What you do is you begin to break down what those scale degrees are and how they relate to one another. So let's say you have a 1, and we're going to start again on the major scale. You have a 1, a 2, a major 3rd, a natural 4th, a natural 5th, a major 6th, a major 7th, back to your 1.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry,
Just another cat thing. Sorry.
Sorry.
These cats are so rude, interrupting.
Cats are, yeah, there's a cat hacking up a hairball in the background. Oh.
How wonderfully appropriate.
Only on South Shore Audio Podcast, folks.
Only here.
Premium
And I don't even like cats that
content. Premium content right here.
As you were saying, you gave the example of A Dorian.
Yeah.
So knowing that A is the root, but to do Dorian, you're thinking about what's the second position there, right? So that means it's gonna.
No.
Or,
I'm gonna
okay, sorry,
I'm
I
gonna
said that wrong.
I'm gonna say that differently. Instead of thinking of it as like, oh, it's the second degree of this major scale.
Yeah.
What's easier is to actually learn what each scale degree is, how it relates to the what's either the relative major or the relative minor scale. And the way that you define these, it can get a little loose. You can really reference any modal scale to a relative major scale, or you can reference it to a relative minor scale.
Okay.
So the way that I reference Dorian, the second mode, is off of a relative minor scale. So let's say we're gonna apply that now to key of C. So like I said,
Yeah, we can just stay in C.
In C major, you have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C over your C major chord. But now how would I turn that into a Dorian scale? So if I'm looking at those relationships, or I'm thinking about those relationships on the guitar, if I think of D Dorian rooting off the second degree of our C major scale, I have a 1, I have a natural 2, I have a flat 3, a natural 5, or a natural 4, I'm sorry, natural 5, a major 6th, then a flat 7, back to a 1. So taking that theory, essentially it's intervals. You learn those intervals and those degrees and how each one changes throughout the modes, and rather than trying to reference back to a central point, I take those degrees relative to whatever scale they're closest to. Like I reference Dorian to the minor scale because it's only 1 degree off of a minor scale, whereas it's 2 degrees off of a major scale. It's just a little bit easier that way. But I take those same references and those values and I can apply them across different keys. So taking it from D Dorian, which is C major, I can make that C Dorian, which is going to be B flat major.
Interesting. This B flat is 2 steps below C.
Ooh, that was a fun little clash at the end there.
So the Ionian is going to...
That's going to be think of that as your 1. That's your major scale.
Right. And that's going to be Dorian for something else.
Dorian, yeah, now application of these modes, I could talk for hours.
Sure.
About how I go about applying them. And in the end, to be a great guitar player, you don't have to apply all 7 modes in a song.
Oh, no.
You have to... No,
certain modes are not going to sound good.
It might sound
songs,
really
right?
bad, but it's knowing how and when to apply them. And honestly, I don't really think in terms of the modes when I'm really playing through a song. I'm thinking more about what sounds good, and that has a lot to do with the chords and the harmony that the song is written around. So it's really, once you learn those modes and you learn those patterns and that theory, it's then taking that and applying it in real time, but starting to take the thought out of it a little more. I mean, you don't want to be thinking all the time when you're playing guitar. You're going to exhaust yourself mentally. Yeah. Whereas if you can just, trust your ear, trust your instincts, and know like, oh, well, over this D minor chord, I have a number of things I can play. I can play a straight ahead minor scale. I can play a Dorian scale. I can play a Phrygian scale if I really want to. And get sort of that... and get, that kind of feel. I can even play a diminished scale and be like... that really fits better over diminished chord. Nobody wants to hear that because that's just. Do you want to hear that for 16 bars in a song? Probably not. But
Sure.
and it's kind of learning almost where to tastefully apply these things, which is where we get into some more tasteful playing.
Right.
And
What that means.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, maybe you
mean-
can. Well, let's take a minute. Why don't
Yeah.
you deconstruct what you think tasteful playing, what that means, what that looks like? Well, first off, I don't know. Maybe you can think about it in two ways. Like, theoretically, what does it look like ideally, and then what does it look like when it's actually played out in practice?
You know, that's the thing with tasteful playing. I don't think there's any ideal. There's no way to really define what that means. Nobody
Gotcha.
teaches you.
There's no objective standard.
There's
for
no
it.
objective standard for how to play tastefully.
Right.
What there is what I like to call musician's instinct. You know, and I feel like this really does have to come with as you get older. I know when I was young, I definitely would tend to play less than tastefully. I was a speed demon when I was young. I was
Sure.
always after being the fastest guitarist on the block. And so I would always push like, oh, let's play a really freaking fast guitar solo over this ballad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that's all well and good, but you know,
That
it'd be
is
better,
not tasteful.
You know, what'd be better is if you played a really tasteful, like, you know, gentle and bendy guitar solo. And I'm sure, you know, Danny and I are going to be recording some guitar tracks for
We
some
are.
of
We're
his
going to
demos
record some
later.
samples later. Yeah.
Yeah, we are, and you know, I'm sure I'll have some chances to demonstrate those kinds of abilities. But you know, it's kind of learning what works and what doesn't, and a lot of it is just trial and error. I mean, you have to spend a lot of time playing really bad guitar to become a really good guitar player. And that's you know, it's always a journey. Like I have days where I can't get my hands to move right, I feel like, and I'm just like, man, everything I play today sucks. And then I'll have a day where I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm hitting all the right notes today for what I'm trying to play. Like, I'm working on this demo and like, man, everything is just coming right out of me. And then you look at it the next day and you try and play it again and you're like, I can't even play what I did yesterday.
Wow.
And so it's always a journey, and it's always a learning experience of, you know, what works, what doesn't, what sounds good. I mean, you have to accept too, you're not going to get everything right on the first try. I mean, the last demo I worked on with Danny, I think we did what, 10
at least
takes?
8 or 9 takes.
Yeah, it was at least 8 or 9 takes for the guitar.
And I ended up
parts.
comping it.
Yeah, and he ended up, you know, cutting and choosing the best parts of each take, and
Right.
just kind of like making this composite take
Right.
of everything I played.
Right.
Funnily enough, that's actually the theme music.
Yeah,
for
I was
this
just gonna say,
podcast,
yeah,
so-
newsflash. Blake was the lead guitar on the theme song for this podcast. So
I was.
Nice.
I will take credit for that. That was also a lot of fun.
as you should.
We ate a lot of great smoked meats that
Oh
day.
yeah, we did.
Beef ribs,
Gosh,
didn't
yeah,
you?
we had some.
That will
beef
be one
spare
of
ribs,
the
some wings.
undertones of every time we hang out. Hopefully, is
smoked meats.
Is that what we kick it
Probably, maybe also good beer.
Yeah,
Maybe good whiskey. You
yeah.
never know.
You're the good beer guy. You that's what you bring to the table.
I-
I'll bring the
we
meats and the
gotta-
barbecue.
Actually,
you bring the beer.
let's
Fall
have a little
Summit.
sidetrack today. Yeah,
Tell
let's
us about
the
it.
beer
All
of
right,
the
well,
day.
I'll allow this rabbit trail. Go for it.
Yeah. There we go. Beer of the day
What do
today.
you got for us?
Danny, because he was not feeling well, did not partake too much. He had a couple sips.
I did take a sip just to try it. It was
Yep.
wonderful.
It was
A
a great
wonderful
beer. So
combination.
today, Nick and I so graciously split a 750 milliliter bottle of the Elevation.
That's a wine bottle, people.
Yeah,
in case
that's
you're
a
wondering, to
wine.
give you reference.
It's
yeah.
a wine bottle.
Yeah.
It's a beer the size of a bottle of wine.
Exactly.
My favorite kind of beer to drink.
Right?
Usually not alone. I don't drink that much. Not often, anyway. What can I say?
It's like only 3 times a week, not very often.
Only 8 days a week.
yeah.
Wait a minute. 8 days a week. But yeah, today Nick and I shared the Elevation Beer Company Barrel Aged False Summit, which is a Belgian quadruple ale. For those of you that don't know, a quadruple ale is a quadruple malted and quadruple hopped ale. Essentially, it creates a very, very big beer, but in the typical Belgian style, it's still very crisp, refreshing. It's very well balanced. This particular one, it clocks in at 11.1% alcohol by volume. So one glass
Pretty
of this,
substantial for a
one
beer.
glass of this is like drinking like 3 Bud Lights, which so this is a
Who drinks that anyway?
Lawnmower
yeah.
beers?
Who drinks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who drinks the lawnmower beers?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was if they were new to this term, but I did mention the term lawnmower beer earlier, and that's what I described.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before.
It's a good one, but and 30 IBUs, so it's not overly bitter. But yeah, it was a fantastic, very full-bodied, nice Belgian beer. It was full of malty goodness. A little.
Speaking
bit
of tasteful, that's tasteful.
yeah. Now that
Yeah.
that is a tasteful beer. You can forget those
In
IPAs,
multiple ways.
folks. That's a tasteful beer.
It's tasteful in the literal sense, but also in the figurative sense,
Well,
right?
and I think this is a great segue back to music talk.
Right.
Because much like a great beer, a great guitar track or a great take through a song or guitar part has to have balance.
Okay.
A great beer has balance.
Yeah.
A great guitar track should have balance. We were talking earlier about Michelangelo Badio from Nitro. I mean, you listen to some of his old solos from the song Another Freight Train.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Freight Train.
Yeah, you go to that music video, that guitar solo. For one, he's playing a quadruple neck guitar. That's not tasteful whatsoever. Don't play those, folks.
No.
Also, to the guy who stole that from him, please give it back. It's been missing for like 20 years. It's about time you've returned it.
Yeah, seriously.
But then, he rips right into the solo, just playing with everything he's got. And to be honest, that's no fault of his own. That was just what people wanted at the time. That was his record label that they were signed to. That's what they wanted him to do, because he was trying to produce more melodic solos.
Yeah.
But I think a guitar solo should really be, solos in particular, even a song, should be kind of a journey.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't just give everything you got right at the start. Unless maybe you're a punk band. I mean, then you got,
There's not a lot of dynamics in punk music.
There's not a lot of dynamics
It's
in
kinda
punk
one
music.
speed.
But we're talking, maybe think of like some alternative rock or like contemporary worship music, or
Sure.
melodic guitar driven music like the works of Andy Timmons
Yep.
or Guthrie Govan. There has to be sort of a very clear starting point. It has to be like a good story. There has to be a starting point. There has to kind of be this build. There has to be almost a climax. Then there has to be, this winding down, and then a resolution. You have to.
It's almost like
Yeah.
the story arc of like a book.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
absolutely. It's 100% like that.
Yeah, it's like writing a narrative.
Yeah.
It's like writing a narrative on the guitar.
I think it was Steve Vai who said, like, he gave the analogy when you play a certain part, it's like asking a question and then you answer it. Did you see
Well,
that?
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard
and
Hans
then
Zimmer say the same thing.
Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer, great film score
Yeah.
composer. He said something very similar.
So great.
He played an example like. He's like, it was like asking a question,
Question.
answering the question.
Yeah.
It's about building tension and then resolving that tension in a tasteful way.
Right.
Not about just shredding up and
Right.
down your neck as fast as you can. For one, you're probably going to give yourself carpal
Sure.
tunnel if you do that too much.
Seriously.
Or if
It's
you're
almost like
yeah,
Yeah. It's almost like what the difference there, another distinction that you could draw, or another way of putting it, would be like one way of playing is like dialoguing.
yeah,
One phrase this, and then the next phrase is a response to what was there. The tension building, and then
Yep.
the resolution of the tension.
yes,
And then the other way is just total monologue, where it's just verbal diarrhea essentially, but musical diarrhea.
musical diarrhea.
Band name, right?
There's a band name right
Band name.
there.
I called it. I got dibs.
Yeah.
Musical diarrhea. There was another one. Actually. Speaking of terrible poop-related band names, this is gonna be a fun tangent.
Oh, we have a litany of band names that you wouldn't even know. We'll show them to you later.
No, but so actually, my girlfriend's roommate was talking about a patient at her work. She's a nursing assistant. This patient, I'm not gonna get too into it because I don't want to talk about this dude's medical ailments. But
Sure.
he had
It involves poop, though.
yes,
Yeah.
it involves poop. Poop's always funny, even when you get old.
Yeah.
Poop's funny. But he had something called a stoma, which is essentially a surgically created outlet of your bowel that usually resides in your abdomen, so it's usually off to like one side or the other of your gut region.
Wow.
And it's usually a result of you may have colon cancer and have to have your colon removed, or some similar condition that can create bowel issues. But anyway, the phrase came up, leaking. I think it was leaking poop hole.
Oh.
Or it may have more specifically been like leaking shithole or something
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh.
But immediately I was in the next room and I walked in and I was like, who just said that? And she's like, I did. And I'm like, I call that is my next band name.
Metal.
It's like, that's going to be metal as all get out, which is super cool. If you like metal, it's super cool. But yeah, just crazy band names. But I like to take that into another topic and say inspiration. Inspiration is a big part of, part writing and guitar playing. And inspiration can really come from anywhere, whether it's your girlfriend's roommate talking about a leaking poop hole on a dude at work, or you could be walking through a park and hear a song that a bird sings, and that could inspire your next melody or your next composition.
One of the things I've learned is that inspiration, I used to think of it as a big lofty concept, like only big things, I guess, would inspire you. So like looking at a mountain, oh, that's inspirational, or
no.
But what I've learned is that like just everyday life, little things, mundane things, you can derive inspiration from anything and anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even things that are like silly or ridiculous,
100%
can inspire things.
And that's one thing as a guitar player too. It's a lot simpler to become inspired than you think. It can be as simple as, let's say maybe you pick up an instrument you haven't touched in a while. Like I'm currently holding Nick's Martin acoustic guitar. It's a D16 GT, it looks like is the model number.
Yeah.
Never played it before, never seen it before, never held it, but at the same time... Oh, that's sour. Oh, that's why. But, and different, playing this instrument, it brings different things out of me than, say, my personal acoustic, which I have a small-bodied Taylor 522, which is...
I played it. It's awesome.
I'm not gonna lie, it's a sweet guitar. I'm super, super, super thankful to have it. It was a lot of saving and a lot of legwork to actually find it, but I'm super happy to have it. Got a great deal on it too, thanks to Reverb.com.
It's a great guitar.
It really is.
It's beautiful.
But inspiration can come from playing a guitar you may not have played in a while. If you have multiple guitars,
right?
If you only have one guitar, try playing in an alternate tuning. Like I love to experiment with open tunings or different like modal tunings. Even more folksy tunings like using DADGAD, which Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin used that a bunch. Or just weird chordal tunings.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is kind of like a phenomenon. I don't know if there's got to be a term for it, but essentially what you're doing is your brain likes to form it. Let's put it this way. Your brain likes to blaze trails, like and then once a certain trail is established, it likes to reinforce that trail and make it
stay there.
Yeah,
To put it in more technical terms, I would say your brain is forming neural pathways.
Precisely, that's probably what we're describing is.
Yeah,
once a neural pathway is created, your brain likes to take that same route.
Yeah, well,
and when you do things like alternate tunings or different instruments or even instruments that are not your instrument.
Yeah.
For example, like when I play keys, I am not a keys player. I can't play the keys.
I'm not trying to say that you're like, no, you're definitely not a keys player. I'm not trying to say that. Sorry.
No, of course I'm not. But because that's a trail that's, got crazy weeds on it that I have to hack down to get through, like it forces a different kind of creative inspiration on me and I produce different things that I would never produce on a guitar. Where I'm more comfortable even if I'm still not 100%.
Yeah, and that's another thing as a guitar player. I feel like you should not just draw your inspirations from guitar. I try to draw inspiration from other places. One of my favorite things to listen to is really awesome drummers, which you never know what kind of ideas you can get from them. You may have a melody pop into your head or a chord progression that you're like, wow, this drummer, like, he's going nuts right now.
Yeah.
But then this chord progression would sound really cool with that. And then you actually,
Yeah.
you figure it out and you start playing it and you're like, oh, wow, well, there's a new idea. Or even
you're
playing,
feeding off of him.
yeah, or even beyond listening to them, you know, playing different instruments. Like you know, my main instrument's guitar. I know a little bit of some other things. I will not call myself a bass player. I would like to say I can play the bass. But you can generate inspiration from the bass. I can play a little bit of keyboards. I generate inspiration from that.
Exactly.
I play mandolin quite a bit. Now that's a weird one because that's like take the lowest 4 strings of a guitar and then tune it upside down and backwards. That's a mandolin for you.
Yeah.
So if you want to throw your own, if you want to just trash your neural pathways and set fire to them, pick up a mandolin. It will change your musical life.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it's just, you know, you can find, like we were talking about, you can find inspiration in some of the most insane places.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Like for
Yeah.
me, writing on guitar, if I want to write music, sometimes it just becomes so routine. I'm so used to it. Not that I know the fretboard great. I don't. I'm trying to get better at that. But if I want to learn something new, or write, that is, I'll sit at a keyboard, an instrument that I'm completely foreign in, and just start messing around. That's how I find those melodies. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's important as a guitar player and as a writer to be open because you don't know where inspiration is going to find you or where you're going to find it.
Yeah.
And so you have to be, you know, ready to accept that. You know, you can't just lock yourself in a room and, you know, bang out notes on your guitar for 6 hours a day and expect to write an album like that. You know, songs come from everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's all about, you know, trying to find those inspirations in those little pieces. Another thing I would recommend as well, when you come up with an idea, as quickly as possible, get it on tape some way or another, even if it's just recorded on your phone or, you know, record it on an actual tape recorder or quick plug into your interface and record it to a DAW. However you can, record it because you're not going to just remember it.
Ideas are fleeting.
Yes, ideas are fleeting.
So much so.
And you never know when that idea can turn into like a full-fledged song.
Yeah.
Or whether that full-fledged song can turn into a hit.
And
I don't write to make hits, I write for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you really have to keep track of these things. Because to write a song, writing songs, you don't just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a song. 2 hours later, all right, here's my song, all done. It doesn't usually happen like that. It can take a number of weeks just to finish one song. At least for someone like me, I work on things very slowly. And I'm indecisive, so I'll change arrangements and things like that around. But, you know, being ready for that kind of thing. Like, I always try to keep, you know, I have probably 100 voice memos in my phone of just different either vocal ideas or guitar ideas.
Yeah. Humming a tune.
Humming a
me
tune
too.
or even humming like a guitar lick.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Me too.
there was one I came up with that it's kind of tough. I don't even know if I can play it right because I haven't played it in a while, but luckily I recorded it, so it's like...
Yeah, to the point that we established.
Something like that. It was just something bouncy, kind of odd meter like that. If I was to just come up with that off the cuff and never have recorded it, I probably wouldn't remember it now. But I recorded it. I listened back to it a few times. I practiced it, not recently, as you can tell. But it was, you know, it was something, it stuck in my mind a lot better than if I just had the idea one day and been like, oh, wow, that was really cool. I should turn that into a song. And then never listened to it again or didn't have a record of it.
Yeah.
Because then I could be like, man, what was that I played? I don't know.
One of my and Nick's high school teachers had a saying she was fond
Jordan.
of. Exactly, yeah. And of course, you'll never forget it, right?
So true.
She always, was it from her dad or her mom that said it? Do you remember
I
that?
think it was her. Thought it was maybe Gran.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I'm not sure.
it's from one of those people. They were fond of saying the weakest ink is better than the strongest memory. And to translate that phrase into our terms,
Yeah.
the most grainy recording quality is better than your strongest memory.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I've experienced that. It's like I think of something like I'm sure I'm gonna remember. I'm sure I
Right,
am,
because
and
it's
I
so
forget it.
clear in your head right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
But
it will be for
tomorrow.
30 minutes or an hour.
Yeah.
Ask yourself in an hour then, hey, what was that cool thing I came up with an hour ago?
Boy, I don't know.
You would try to.
You might be lucky to remember half of it
Yeah.
or like a few parts of it, but the whole thing, it's more than likely you're just not going to remember it.
You try to
Rarely ever.
associate it with something or an idea, and still it's just gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I've experienced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even, and even if you can't record audio, one thing I find that's helpful is like I used to carry a notebook with me of tablature paper, which, for those of you that don't know, maybe you're not guitar players or you haven't read much guitar music, but there's a form of notation for the guitar called tablature,
Right.
where it's instead of having 5 lines like a musical staff or like a grand staff, it has 6 lines, which are the 6 strings of your guitar, and then you would just write fret numbers on those strings, and that would essentially be how you remembered your lick. And that would even be better than just, like, oh, I'm going to remember that, and then you don't. So I would actually write things down as I came up with them, and then eventually, as I messed with them a little more, I would kind of hash out the rhythms, and then I would transfer that to actual sheet music and have something cohesive that I could hand to other players and be like, hey, how does this sound to you? Do you like this? And like I could play it for them, and they can look at it and see, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like I like that, or something like that, if they like it.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't. You have to be okay with that. Not everybody's
Yeah.
gonna like what you do all the time, and that's okay.
Better have them be honest about it, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's invaluable as a
how
musician
you
and a
get
writer. Have people that you trust to bounce your ideas off of. Like as you record something, send it to that friend of yours who's also a writer and be like, "Hey, how do you like this?" And make sure it's someone who is going to be brutally honest if they have to be, but is also going to lift you up when they should and know that they can.
Yeah.
And it's just important to have people to bounce ideas off of. I mean, very few people write and produce records completely by themselves. Actually, I don't think anybody really does anymore. Just one person in a room doing everything.
I can think of a guy. Actually,
Is that you?
No. Well, sometimes, but
Yeah.
no. The last guest on this podcast, Christopher Franzen, the composer from Sweden.
Yeah. I listened.
He does
to-
everything
listened
by
to his
himself.
interview. Yeah, sure.
I
but
mean,
I'm sure he
I'm
even
not-
has.
I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right way to go, but he does it, and that's his
Yeah.
choice.
Well, some people can operate like that, and
Yeah.
who's to say maybe he doesn't have a friend that he sends things to on occasion, be like, "Hey, man,
Sure,
working on this idea. What do you think of this?"
I'd be very surprised if everything that he did was complete isolation, because at
Yeah.
some point there's got to be somebody who he introduces into the process, even
Absolutely.
if it's not the writing or the composing, even if it's just I made this, I need somebody to give feedback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah.
well, we need that. We
Yeah,
all
yeah.
need that.
Humans are very feedback oriented.
Yeah.
I was gonna say humans are very feedback oriented people. Creatures. They're not we are feedback oriented creatures. Whereas, and a lot of that comes from, some people have an internal drive just to seek validation for the things that they do. Other times, people genuinely want to know because they may not be sure if what they're doing is, 100% right or something like that. And so I might record an idea and send it off to one of my old buddies and be like, "Hey, man, what do you think about this?" And I have a list of people I can send it to on occasion. And then, I might get feedback like, "Hey, man, that's really good. Like, can I work with you in developing this further? Like, you should put a little more time into that and get, maybe you can get a better result." And then sometimes you'll have the idea where your friend's just like, "Look, man, this is garbage. You should never look at it again." But that, again, can be a source of inspiration. Be like, "Oh, well, I'm going to make it not garbage." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing. Don't let the haters keep you down.
No. Don't listen to him. Right. Most haters are punching up anyway.
Excuse the impromptu jam.
Sure. It's in your-
Smooth Jazz, KWS,
Yeah, exactly.
103.9.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. Well, I don't know. Was there something else we wanted to touch on that we didn't?
Well, tone. We could
Yeah.
talk about guitar tone.
Yeah, let's talk about that, and then we'll probably wrap it up here.
Yeah.
It plays into the conversation about tasteful playing on it too. Because
Yeah, and
the tone
you know,
that you bring
yeah.
is very important.
The tone and even the instrument. I mean, you're not going to show up. Let's say you get asked to play for a Mumford & Sons-esque kind of band. Are you gonna show up with your shredder guitar and
your
a huge
Mesa
pedal
dual
board
rectifier?
and your Mesa dual rectifier? And are you gonna cut a shredding metal track on that? Even if you maybe you'd played something that could have been considered slightly complementary to what they're doing, it's not gonna fit what they're trying to evoke. And I mean, if you roll in with all that, they're probably not even gonna let you record and just be like, you know what, dude, you're not right for the job. Go home. And I've been fortunate. That was one thing I was fortunate enough to do at Berklee was play a lot of different gigs. My main thing was I played in the Steely Dan ensemble at Berklee, so I learned a bunch of really cool old Dan tunes. And if you want to work out your hands and work out your brain musically, that's a good band to start with right there, and one of my favorites, not to mention. But I also got asked to play on some sound-alike projects. I mean, I spent 4 hours one night playing who was it? It was some country artist. I think it was maybe like Sheryl Crow or something, but literally playing like Sheryl Crow covers. So what did I show up with, you ask? Well, I showed up with a Telecaster and a twin reverb, aka what every country guitarist in Nashville uses at some point. I got asked to play on a metal session for a sound-alike project for the band Periphery, which, if you don't know Periphery, they're
like prog metal, basically.
They're
right?
super aggressive, difficult, technically advanced prog metal. And a lot of it is drop tune guitars, extended range guitars, very, very high gain amplifiers, but also they have a wide range of clean sounds in there as well. So what did I show up with? Which was entirely borrowed gear, by the way, because I don't have, tens of thousands of dollars to drop on 8 different guitar rigs for whatever strikes my fancy on a given day.
Well, you have it now on the Axe Effects, though, right?
Yeah, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But I I showed up with my friend's Mesa Boogie dual rectifier and a 4x12 cab. I had a tube screamer, I had a Boss noise gate, and I had borrowed a friend's Ibanez 7-string. And I borrowed his 6-string Ibanez as well, just because they do some 6-string and 7-string stuff. There was another, I think I borrowed, and it was a crazy guitar. It was an 8-string Mayonis, which Mayonis is a custom brand. I forget where they're from, but they build, they're entirely hand-built instruments, and this thing was worth probably $4,000. And I felt nervous even touching it, let alone playing super heavy death metal on it. But, and it's all about being able to gauge based on the setting what you need to bring and how you need to play. I'm not going to show up to that Periphery session and start chicken picking on a Telecaster. I'm going to start, beating the crap out of and palm muting on an Ibanez or 8-string, 7-string guitar of some kind. And likewise, I'm not going to show up, like I said, to the Mumford & Sons session with the shredder rig. It's all about being able to gauge based on what the artist is looking for, how you need to play. And that's one thing that can be difficult if you play a lot of different kinds of music. Financially, it may not be feasible to own a lot of different rigs, which is where I get into what
how
Danny
do you address
just
that
mentioned.
problem?
How do you address this problem, you ask?
Yeah.
In the 21st century, we live in the digital age. It took me
That
forever
we do.
to finally adopt this. I've been a purist for the longest time. For the longest time, I was of the school, oh, you should only use a tube amplifier because tubes sound the best. Oh, you should only use boutique pedals because boutique pedals sound the best. Or they should only be analog, except if you buy the Strymon pedals, which are awesome even though they're not analog.
Right.
And the Strymon...
I love them.
I love Strymon pedals. They are insanely good.
I just sold my Big Sky Timeline and Zuma this morning.
Really?
Shipped them off, yeah.
Are you going for what I'm about to talk about?
Maybe. I'm still parsing out what I'm going to do next. Okay. Something digital, though.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
But essentially, the Strymon pedals actually were kind of my gateway because, for one, that taught me, okay, digital technology and the the fatal buzzword among guitar equipment manufacturers, modeling technology, is not what it once was. It's not the old red kidney bean Line 6 pod or the Line 6 Spider amplifier, that 15-watt amp, the first amp that everybody gets. It has that insane button on it that's just like ridiculous gain. It's like a
Line 6.
Yeah, and it's like a tin can full of Hornets is what it sounds
Right.
like. But now you have
I hate Line 6. Let me go on the record by saying that. I don't know if there's one product they make that I like.
You know, you should try the Line 6 Helix though. As far as modelers go, it is fantastic.
Really?
I mean, it's expensive. It's $1,500, but
maybe that's like the one thing I'd like. But anyways, continue.
Maybe. But you know, Strymon pedals, because they were all digital and they are essentially modeling effects, they kind of opened me up to that gateway of, hey, maybe this modeling thing isn't so bad. So I started to dabble a little more. I got an amp sim in my an amp sim plugin to run alongside my DAW that I would cut demo tracks with, and then I realized I really like some of the sounds this thing is putting out.
What was that plugin? If I can ask.
I had a couple actually. I think I had Guitar Rig 4 was one of the early ones, and then I had another one called Amplitude.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking at getting.
Yeah, Amplitude was pretty good. It definitely took a while to dial that one in, but that was kind of what
those are the two big ones, I think.
Yeah, those are definitely the two big ones
guitar
for guitar,
amps.
unless you go the Universal Audio route, in which case they have actual like manufacturer sponsored amp models. You can get like free.
Well, IK Multimedia has that with Ampeg.
Yeah, IK Multimedia does as well, and I think Mesa Boogie and Fender. They have some authorized like Fender and Mesa Boogie stuff in there as well.
Orange too.
Yeah, Orange as well. But essentially, what we're trying to say here is that, you know, I quickly realized that guitar technology is leaps and bounds beyond what my old, 60-something teacher had taught me when I started playing. He's like, oh, that modeling stuff is garbage. It sounds like trash. Listen to this Line 6 piece of crap amplifier, and it sounds like a tin can full of angry Hornets that were also probably drunk because it had no articulation whatsoever. But then I started to mess around, and one of the turning points for me actually was when I was at Berkeley. A friend of mine had a product called the Fractal Audio Axe-Fx. I had never truly been a believer in modeling until I played that. I plugged into it. I heard him play it first, and I was like, okay, that sounds pretty good, but a lot of guitar playing is about feel. I plugged into it, and I was like, put me on a model of like a Marshall Plexi. Now, this guy was a big Marshall fan, so he had like a super well dialed in preset for a Marshall, like a cranked Marshall Plexi.
Sure.
And I plugged into it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is mind blowing. Like, the sound was there, and the feel was there.
The authenticity.
It really truly felt and sounded authentic. And you have to take it from a slightly different standpoint, because a lot of guitar players, they're used to listening to a naked amp in the room with a bunch of pedals. You have to treat modeling as if you're listening to an amp that's sitting in a studio, mic'd up, and like you're playing
it through the monitors.
Yeah, like you're playing in the control room, listening through the monitors, like the mixed up version of it, like the actual EQ'd and properly rendered version of the guitar track.
In other words, what it's really going to sound like after
it's produced, like properly produced and mixed and everything and set into the song. And if you can pick up that standpoint, you will quickly realize that modeling technology, not only one, is it exactly as good as tonally as a traditional amp and pedals rig might be for guitar. It, in some ways, is honestly superior because of the fact that you can get some
more precise.
It's far more precise. It's also more consistent. Tubes are made, vacuum tubes, which are what power most guitar amplifiers, are made of glass and wires, and they get very, very hot. What does glass do when it gets hot? It warps. So what do you think that does? Well, it changes the tone nearly every time you turn your amplifier on. It's very, very slight, but some days you might notice, wow, my tone sounds like garbage. And then other days you might be like, man, this amp has never sounded this good. Well, that's because it's not consistent. So, long story short, just a few months ago, actually, I made the jump, and I sold off most of my pedals to actually buy myself a Fractal Audio product. Now, I went with a lower tier option. They have something called the AX8, which for me is perfect because it's a floorboard based unit. The traditional Fractal Audio stuff has been rack mounted, which I do not own a rack, and I am not interested in building and carrying around a rack everywhere. So for me, the floorboard was perfect, and it has enough processing power to do exactly what I was wanting it to do. And once I started to get into it a little more, I was like, wow, this thing can literally do everything. Like, I could get the cleanest, shimmery, like, 80s studio guitar tones, like clean tones. I could get Motown funk tones. I could run an acoustic guitar through it, and it would sound great processing that. I could get crushing heavy metal tones. I could get, like, the ultimate, worship guitar tone, which I use regularly at the church that Danny and I play at. And, it's insane for me to think about the fact that, my old pedal board, which was like, I think I probably had close to 4 or 5.
Big.
It was huge. Danny can vouch. It was
It's
way
like a pedal
too
train
big.
3 just crammed, right?
Yeah, it was like a pedal
Just
train
full.
3 crammed full of pedals, like edge to edge. You couldn't even see the board through all the pedals.
Right.
But it's crazy for me to think that I have this one box that cost $1,000 that can replicate literally any guitar rig on the planet
On command.
on command with the push of a button.
And you push another button and you have a completely new set
And
of
and you push
new set
push another
of
button, you have a completely
preset
new
chain of
completely
whatever.
new sound, completely new chain of effects, completely different amp and speaker combination, completely different mic. You can change mic models in there.
Yeah,
You can
it's-
change the power tubes within your amplifier. You can alter parameters of the individual amplifier.
Right. To make those changes in real time would take Hours.
Well, it's talking.
Yeah.
You can even edit like the power tube bias voltage of an amplifier, and there are some like impossible combinations. Like I can have a Vox AC30 preamp, but run it into a 100 watt Marshall power section and put that through a Mesa Boogie 4x12, and mic it with 5 different mics if I really want to.
that just doesn't work in real life.
That just doesn't happen in real life. One, because a Vox AC30 is a Vox, not a Marshall. They're very, very different amplifiers. So to try and marry those two together, you would either have to have it custom built or spend $1,000 getting it to be married together, which is not feasible or worth it. Most people just can't afford that kind of legwork.
No.
So for $1,000, I get all of the tweakability of both amps, pedals, speakers, mics, signal chains, anything I could ever want.
Everything you want.
And I could not even do probably 20% of that. No, I will even say I couldn't even do 10% of that with what was my close to $5,000 worth of effects and pedals and a pedal board and power supplies and cabling and a traditional tube amplifier, which had one sound. It sounded like that amp all the time.
Right. And it was a good sound.
It was a good sound, don't get me wrong. I loved it. But it opened up so many more creative possibilities to be able, within one preset, I can change what's known as scenes. So it'll actually, like, for my worship preset, I have, what's called clean bass sounds, and I have dirty bass sounds. For my cleaner bass sounds, I'm using a Mesa Boogie Lone Star through a open back 2x12 cab. Gives you a nice, open, rich kind of sound. When I switch to my dirty sounds, it's a model of a Sir Badger 30 running into a Marshall 4x12 closed back cab with like a Royer 121 on it to get a little bit of a beefier spectrum. And it's like, can you do that in real life? Kind of. I mean, you could have totally separate signal chains like that, but it's going to cost you well over $10,000 to have something that's going to work that well with that exact functionality, and then that's going to be it. You're not going to have anything else. And to think that I was able to replace way too much money's worth of gear, like I said, probably $4,000 or $5,000 in just pedals, not including my amplifiers, depending on if I was running in stereo, with one box that cost me $1,000. And then I think I dumped like another $100 on an expression pedal to control some other parameters in there. But that's it.
Yeah, that's nothing compared to everything
Yeah, that's
else.
nothing compared to how much. I mean, the units that Danny was just talking about, the Strymon Big Sky, Timeline, and the Zuma, that right there, that's like $1,200 worth of gear.
Yeah.
In 2 pedals and a power supply.
An amp and a power supply.
Yeah. But
$250 I spent on that power supply.
yeah, $250 just to power
just to power
just
pedals.
to power pedals.
Yeah.
Not even a pedal, just to power your pedals.
Right.
Let alone, the $470 retail price of the Strymon Big Sky.
Yeah, I bought the Big Sky brand new 4 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, I did.
Directly from Strymon. It's like
I did the same thing.
$480.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Timeline I bought. I actually found a guy. Funny story. You probably know this website called the Gear Page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I went on there Emporium, and
That's like the musical version of Reddit. It's awful sometimes.
Right,
But it's also a lot of fun.
Exactly. It's kind of, sometimes it's a sewer. And anyway, there was a guy in there. At the time, my delay pedal was a Empress Vintage Modified Super Delay.
Which is an awesome delay pedal.
Awesome delay pedal.
Delay pedal.
Probably the best tape delay sound still I've
Yes, the
that I can
best
remember.
tape delay sound that's not an actual tape delay.
Right.
For sure.
And the Strymons come really freaking close, but it's still not exactly the same thing. But I wanted to get a Timeline because I wanted more versatility.
Yeah.
And I found a guy in there who was like, had a Timeline, and he only, granted, 5 years ago, this was a time when, like, now you go on Reverb and you go all these places, you can find Timelines and Big Skies being sold all the time. But 5 years ago, it was rare to find somebody selling a Timeline.
Oh yeah, well they were hot gear for the longest time.
Oh yeah,
and I mean they're
so hot. This was before the Big Sky even existed, right?
Well, and that's another thing. That's the bane of existence. I feel like for pedals and effects, is there's literally a flavor of the week like every week. I mean,
although I think the
can
Strymon
remember-
ones will hold up for a long
the
time.
Strymon ones are holding
'cause
up.
They're so well made.
But even they're starting to be ousted because Empress came out with their newest product called the Ecosystem, which is, it's quite literally kind of a Timeline killer. It's more powerful and it's smaller, and it sounds, a lot of people think it sounds just as good. Who is it?
Maybe
Source
so.
Audio came out with
Maybe
their
I'm
own.
biased because I'm going to stand by Strymon for a long time.
Oh yeah, well
man,
no,
I'm just-
Strymon's great.
Just in love
but
with
it's
them.
there's a flavor of the week. The Timeline and the Big Sky, that used to be the only answer for pro grade delay and reverb on a pedal board. Now guys are starting to open up for when it first came out, the flavor of the week. Oh my gosh, the Empress Ecosystem, that's the greatest thing ever. And then it was the GFI System Specular Tempest, and then it was the oh no, you've got to get the Source Audio Nemesis, or you've got to get the New Neighbor Effects Immerse, or the Echelon.
I know a lot of people raved about the Eventide H9.
Oh,
as
I
well.
had a couple of H9s.
Yeah.
That used to be, before I got a Timeline and Big Sky, the H9s were my jam. Not gonna lie, they are insane, but they just did way too much. I just needed delay and reverb, but I got delay, reverb, pitch, modulation, distortion.
I mean, they do everything,
fuzz.
right?
They do
Yeah.
everything. You know what? They actually, I will admit, they do it really well. The H9 is fantastic.
I believe it, but you can only do one thing at a time, right?
Yeah, and it's
So,
that was the downfall to me of the H9, is like, I would love to be able to have a chain of effects in one box, but you
Exactly.
can't get that, which leads me to why I got the Axe effects.
Exactly, because then you can do that with a push of one button.
One
on
button,
that.
one box. I can change guitar rigs on the fly.
Sure.
And not only that, but even their factory program presets. They come out of the box with a setup of amazing sounds before you even start dialing in your own. Like, I could probably accomplish everything I need to with just the factory sounds if I really wanted. But, I felt I took the time to invest in, I did download some other users' presets, and I based a couple of mine around that, and I also built some of my own from the ground up. But yeah, it's, taking the time to do that, I feel like I really learned it really well and started to get into some of the better functionality of things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's all in the name of versatility and all in the name of being able to really bring the goods to the game when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Like walking into that metal session, no matter what, okay, I have the rig for that. Walking into that country session, I
With
have
the
the rig
Axe
for
effects,
that.
you're equipped for virtually anything now.
Yeah, exactly. Walking into church on a Sunday morning, I have the rig for that. It's it's like when the iPhone first came out. There's an app for that. Well, in the Axe effects, there's a rig for that.
Exactly.
And it's it was the greatest thing I did creatively, because I'm no longer dealing with selling and buying pedals all the time, which you almost always lose money in doing.
right.
I can just sit for an hour with my monitors, reprogram some presets, and next thing I know, I've got an entirely new setup from the ground up for whatever I might want to do, be it ambient guitar or crushing death metal.
Right.
You just never know.
Yeah. About being prepared. Well, that was great. I felt like that was a really enlightening discussion. Kind of went all over the place, but there was no plan. Well, I hope you guys got something out of that, though, because that was a lot of fun.
It was.
The John Mayer song, Daughters.
Maybe. No, a girl.
Yeah.
Who puts the colors inside of my world. I should probably stop before we get sued for copyright infringement.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to say I sound as good as John
Be
Mayer.
nice,
I'm not
John.
close.
Be nice.
No, yeah.
Come on, John.
Leave us
Be cool,
alone.
man.
He probably
Look-
doesn't even own that song.
Look, man,
Which
we
is
all
ironic.
know your signature PRS is just a Strat ripoff. It's no secret.
Don't make
So
him mad.
Don't
make him
you
mad,
don't you even talk about
but with
ripping.
PRS quality, so.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely not a bad thing. That's
Yeah.
not a bad thing whatsoever.
No, it's an upgrade.
It's
So.
a big upgrade.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that. Hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. And we're going to be ripping into some
Wings.
real-world examples. And we're going to have... What's that?
Said wings.
Oh, yeah.
Wings.
Some
Yeah.
jams.
Whatever.
Because what would a music podcast and conversation be without actual music in it, right? So that'll
True
be the next
that.
thing. So,
True that.
all right, guys. Next time.
See ya.